Whether actually the government can take any credit for this is the inimitable Chris Snowdon, who's head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
So Rishi Sunak saying this is it, bright days ahead, inflation's dropped, we've had a big old pat on the back from the IMF, we're getting loads of foreign direct investment in, we're sweeping the floor with these stagnant ailing economies like Germany and like France. Everyone can now be rest assured that if they vote Conservative, the economy is in safe hands because we're doing a sterling job. Do you buy it?
Well, it's good news. Let's be honest. It's very good that inflation is nearly back to the 2% target. Will very likely continue, I think, to go down below that target. We shall see. There's a number of reasons why it didn't go down even more, and there's reasons indeed why it did go down, particularly the energy price cap coming down. But also, you saw a big increase in the national living wage last month, so that has led to service inflation being a bit higher than a lot of people would like. So we'll see what the Bank of England wants to do about this. I mean, the idea that Jeremy Hunt can take claim credit for the drop in inflation is ridiculous. I don't know what he's talking about when he says his plan is working. He has had literally nothing to do with inflation. Inflation went up because a lot of money was printed during COVID, and it's come down because after about 2 years or so, that money feeds through the system. So it was always going to come down.
Well, this is it. I think, if anything, the government can be held fully accountable for not protecting us more against the roller coaster of energy prices by having a sensible energy policy where we can be more self-sufficient and decoupling the cost of electricity from wholesale gas prices. Could have taken VAT off their energy bills, perhaps. And then at the same time, as you're saying, there's not much they've done when it comes to, or they've not much they can do when it comes to the independence of the Bank of England determining interest rates. The only thing the Tory governments have seen to be done in recent years when it comes to interest rates is see them go through the roof after Liz Truss wanted to cut every single tax at the same time without costing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, Liz Truss hasn't had anything to do with this either, not least because nothing in the mini budget actually got introduced, apart from the energy price cap, which actually has suppressed inflation to some extent. Look, the Bank of England doesn't really want to accept the reasons why inflation went up in the first place. It's never really acknowledged the reasons. Mervyn King, one of Andrew Bailey's predecessors, has acknowledged that a huge amount of money printing was always bound to debase the currency and lead to inflation. But the Bank of England hasn't really, and the Bank of England probably should have started winding down interest rates a little bit several months ago, but it hasn't done. It's still, not acknowledging or understanding why inflation went up in the first place. It's not sure which way it's going in the next 6 months. I think if you look at what's likely to happen, rather than looking at lagging indicators, it would suggest we don't have very much to worry about. And actually, the bigger concern now is slowing the economy down and people's mortgages. And a lot of people on fixed rates are still okay, but not for much longer. So I certainly think that the Bank of England should be putting interest rates down no later than June. But I don't think it will, because basically the Bank of England just copies what the Federal Reserve does. And because inflation's been quite sticky in America and for most of the last year, around about 3.5%, the Fed has been reluctant to reduce interest rates. And because the Bank of England basically just copies the American system, I imagine we'll have to wait for the Federal Reserve to do something first.
Chris, there seems to be there's a constant stark contrast here. One is the government failed to seem to create a buffer between crises and protecting the British people and British interests when it comes to big things such as during the pandemic, locking everybody up, printing a load of money, quantitative easing, creating this false economy which massively overheated things, got that massively wrong. I've said already about 5 times today, energy policy for decades has been massively wrong. And then yet at the same time, when you feel that the government could do things or could step in to be a bit more creative when it comes to mapping out how we can grow the economy, mapping out how we can bring back prosperity to the country, creating a sort of more radical path, let's say. They've sort of prevented themselves from being able to do this by giving complete independence to the Bank of England, by making sure all of their budgets are signed off by the OBR, and sort of tying themselves up in this Gordian knot of market reactivity, which means that they can't, there's a very narrow path that they seem to be able to walk, whoever is in power. Would I be right in sort of making that assessment that, frankly, when it comes to managing the economy, the government have very little role to play at all?
No, I don't think I do agree with that. Actually, I don't think there's anything in principle wrong with the Bank of England being independent, as long as it's in charge of getting inflation down to the target. The trouble is, it hasn't been very good at doing that, but I don't think the government would be any better at it either. I think what's holding the country back is actually legislation and regulation, and the government does have, obviously, a huge role to play in that. The trouble is that not just the Tories, I think all parties are very reluctant to take on vested interests. To give one example, you've already mentioned, the reason that energy prices have come down so much is that America is hugely self-sufficient in energy and is now a massive exporter of natural gas. And it's done that because it is very big on fracking. Now, the UK is never going to be as big on fracking as the USA, but we'll never know because it's been banned. And that's just one of many examples whereby the government is beholden to various special interest groups and ideological interest groups and the likes of Greenpeace, who nobody should listen to about anything. They've managed to get golden rice banned in the Philippines. Absolute anti-scientific maniacs. And so if the government is going to ring fence a whole load of areas and say, we're not going to touch this, we're not going to touch this, then there's very little you can do. And as far as I'm concerned, it means that Brexit was largely pointless.
Do you know what, Chris? I kind of feel that was the rallying cry, wasn't it, from the people to take back control, to sort of cut the apron strings from these supranational organisations, the NGOs, the sort of group woke think that happens at the sort of top of the table. And yet none of that, as you said, has been done. Chris Snowdon, thank you ever so much for